Hi, critical thinkers. Welcome to another live episode of Critical Mass TV. I am Brad Hartley, host of the show that truly believes a world based on direct democracy and bottom-up decision-making is our best hope for ending corporate domination and leveraging a just, sustainable, and productive world. Join us as we practice some mixed mental arts to pump up our intellectual self-defense. So it is Sunday, June 22nd, and we are broadcasting from the wonderful VCAM studios in Burlington, Vermont, which happens to be the only local media where one can, without censorship, speak truth to power. Tonight, I have three guests who will help illustrate that point. I would like to introduce Avery Pittman, a member of Rising Tide Vermont, and Jane and Nate Palmer, Monkton residents and farmers whose land stands to be bisected by a Canadian-owned gas pipeline in its attempt to reach International Paper, a New York paper mill. Part of the never-ending quest for corporate profits and damn the expense. Climate justice and climate truth are the epitome of global issues. With an increase of only several more degrees in average temperatures worldwide, rich or poor, everyone's goose is cooked. Since I am a person that likes to think we have a glorious future, I see hope in the fact that not a single fossil fuel infrastructure project, either proposed or underway, isn't being actively resisted. Which brings us to tonight's discussion. Let's talk so-called Vermont Gas, the Public Service Board, and the state of our local fossil foolishness. Clearly, the owners of our society believe that the economic benefits of enriching themselves with continued fossil fuel dependence trump the environmental impacts which could include our own demise. Hello, Avery, Jane, and Nate, and thanks for being here. We were all at the final Public Service Board hearing in Middlebury, I guess it was a week and a half ago. And as Rebecca Foster mentioned to me earlier, 94.4% of the people speaking at the Public Service Board hearing were strongly opposed to the pipeline. So my just question to get us going is, where do we go from here? What do you think our next steps are?
Well, our next step is a select board meeting Monday night to discuss with the select board and Vermont Gas and their engineering company the route going through town. Because for some reason they don't think that you need the options from the landowners before you build a pipeline. You can just go right ahead and build it.
So this is the Monkton Select Board.
Yeah. Monkton still only has 13 easements out of 43. So
wow, that's not
they're a
very
long
many.
way off from getting all the easements that they need.
And that's to complete the pipeline, phase 1 through Monkton.
Right. Yeah.
Do you, I know you're completely speculating, but are most of those, do you think, going to go to eminent domain proceedings, or do you think people will eventually sell, for the easement?
A lot of people are pretty determined to fight it to the end. I think it's it's heartening to see how many people are just planting their feet in the ground.
Yeah.
Saying, they're not really giving people an incentive to cooperate. I think what they're doing is hoping that once they start construction and people see the bulldozers coming, that maybe they'll feel at that point ready to negotiate. But for me, it just makes me feel like fighting y'all the more.
Right, eminent domain for the profits of a private company. That's where we have gotten.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We had a meeting last week, a landowner meeting with Chris Recchia and Chris Bray, and they were just talking about restarting the whole negotiation process between Vermont Gas and the landowners, and they said, this is a follow-up from the meeting we had a month or so before that, and they want to know how things are changed, are things better? It's like, well, they're not really talking to us, so it's kind of hard to say that they've changed or that they're better when there's no negotiation really going on. There's very minimal talk. it's amazing. I talk to people, up and down the line, and where are these land agents? They're making a random call here and there to somebody, but they're really not out there trying to put down the sales pitch and get the whole route secured when they're sitting here talking about how they want to start in a few weeks. In fact, they've even asked for permission to start before they get all their permits in place. It's kind of crazy how they're doing business.
Right. Of course, they're trying to keep their costs as low as possible, so they don't want to keep increasing offers for the easement to landowners.
Oh yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Didn't they send like the letters that they sent out to people that hadn't already signed, where it basically threatened you with eminent domain proceedings in their offer to negotiate, or wasn't it
Right,
something?
yeah, I think there were 7 letters that
Yeah,
went
7 or
out,
9.
and some of the people hadn't been in contact. They hadn't been contacted for months. So it was kind of an out of the blue thing for them to say. It was several weeks after they got their CPG in December
Right.
of 2013. So they kind of used that as this catalyst to get people to move, like cattle, move them through the chute, and
Yeah.
people didn't buy it. They just got kind of angry because they hadn't had their questions answered. They hadn't, come to any part of a negotiation that they felt comfortable with.
And I think it's important because the CPG was issued, and the line the whole time from the land agents, as far as I can tell, just doing organizing along the route, has been that it's inevitable, it's going to happen anyway. So the CPG came through, and then it seemed really imminent, and so then they sent their letters for eminent domain to these people. And it's been interesting to see the more people raise their voices and cause a ruckus around the pipeline, the less clear it is that it's definitely going to be inevitable, or that it's definitely happening. I think that there was a huge flurry of oh no, the CPG is passed, we're going to see construction early spring, and it's we've continued to keep the pressure on them so that they haven't been able to start construction yet. I think that
They would expect everybody to just, at that point, just be quiet and let the project continue. They're very, like every company, they're really used to getting their own way, and they're kind of out of their element when it comes to negotiating. And they're used to threatening and intimidating anybody, to get their way. When they're, all else fails, they will
Right.
threaten and intimidate you.
Right.
And then, of course, they tried to comfort a lot of landowners before the CPG was issued, because they said, well, a lot of the questions you have that you're asking, we'll be able to answer once the CPG is issued. And then the first thing they do after the CPG is issued is issue eminent domain letters. And then turn around and say, well, those weren't really eminent domain letters.
That's when the PR people get a hold of it. And remember, for people listening, the CPG is the Certificate of Public Good issued by the public,
Public
which I
Service
use in
Board.
quotes always, Service Board. And that all has to do with Phase 1.
Yeah. One of the other things that came up with Phase 1, Marin Vasatka, who's a realtor in Monkton, brought up the fact that they were offering options for easements to people. And when they signed, it was like a first right of refusal type thing. Not that the landowner could refuse, but they would give you $500 or $1,000 for signing on. And then they would wait and close on the easement when they got around to it. So they had, I think most of the agreements in Monkton were options. And Marin brought that up to the Public Service Department. And once the CPG was issued, the department said they should not offer options anymore. They should go right to easements. Now, when the easement is agreed upon and settled, they have to cough up the bigger amount of money.
The full amount.
$3,500 or whatever they're offering people. So it meant that they had to come up with some more money. So we figured maybe that was why they were backing off on pursuing easements with people, because they had to go through and not only just give them a signed piece of paper with a check for $500, but they would also have to do the attorney work and the legal things and get it recorded at the town.
Right.
So it's, it's a bigger thing for them and more of a commitment. And I think to me, it looks like they're a little hesitant to do that because maybe they're not so sure that things are going to work out.
Yeah, because they're definitely used. Like I said, they're used to getting their own way, and very rarely does anyone ever resist an infrastructure project like this. We know the reasons why we're doing it. I mean, that we're headed for a climate disaster. Not to mention the rights to landowners, like the abusive rights to landowners like yourself. But you're seeing a little bit of nervousness at a managerial level about what to do, how to proceed. That they had people and got instant feedback about the Public Service Board hearing in Middlebury for Phase 2 that we were all at, as I mentioned. When people are not just that vocal, but incredibly articulate and intelligent, points that make a lot of sense. And it really does make them nervous at that executive level. I guarantee you they're having a lot of meetings and they don't know exactly how to proceed.
Right. Well, it wouldn't be the first time a big pipeline project has been
Scuttled.
The Champlain pipeline in the late 70s,
It was
late
89, 90.
80s. Yeah. So, and that one got a CPG, a Certificate of Public Good, but then it just kind of evaporated.
Fell apart.
There was a lot of resistance to that, including from our governor when he was a select board member in Putney. He was the chair of the select board member, and he fought it tooth and nail back when there wasn't a climate change issue or that we didn't know about it. And
there was an issue, we just weren't acknowledging
it. It wasn't on the front of everybody's mind, and fracking wasn't an issue back then. So it was kind of interesting that he's supporting this one now when he was against that one back then.
Yeah.
He says that's basically because the people that were doing the Champlain pipeline were not good corporate citizens. But if you look at the structure of who's putting this pipeline through, it's just the same players under different headings.
Sure.
It's kind of crazy to say that they're any different. It's the same thing. In fact, some of the paperwork that we had to deal with through the 248 process is the Champlain pipeline paperwork brought back up again.
Just with a new title crossed out.
Yeah, they don't even cross it out. There's a little footnote on the bottom supplied by the Champlain pipeline.
So they're recycling.
Exactly. Yeah, trying to save the world.
So Avery, you were just mentioning that you guys were doing organizing work in Williston today.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing and what that involved?
Yeah. So we have been, I think, since this whole issue started emerging, Rising Tide has been using a strategy of base building and also organizing with folks on the ground who are directly impacted by the pipeline, and part of that is going door to door on in neighborhoods. 10 miles of the route is along a V-Trans corridor, which was where the Cirque Highway was being proposed to be built, but the Cirque Highway is now a dead project. Technically.
Because of wetlands, right?
Because of wetlands. They didn't get their permits in. But Vermont Gas has a small segment of that right-of-way that they're going to build the pipeline through, and it's easier for them because they don't have to sign easements with private landowners. They can just sign with V-Trans and get a whole 10-mile segment of pipe through there. But so they don't have to notify any of the neighborhoods that are abutting the route that is the pipeline is going through.
Right.
And so me and Anna, who's another member of Rising Tide, and we met with Jenny this morning. She lives in Monkton, and she's super on her shit about facts and numbers and stuff. But we were looking at this map, and basically the pipeline is within 300 feet of the houses in the neighborhood.
Really?
And it means we were out talking to folks today on the doors, and they were saying how they had gone to the Williston town offices and asked what could be done about this pipeline. They didn't want the pipeline to come through on that section of land. The trees that are right in the backyard of their house are all going to have to come down, so they're going to have to radically change the landscape back there to accommodate for the construction of the pipeline. And the line, from a lot of the town officials and the lawyers and the people representing the gas company is, this project is inevitable. You should just get your piece of the pie while you can and get out and don't waste your time fighting this at all. Another thing that's interesting to mention is in Williston, there's Allenbrook School, which is a K-3 school, and the pipe is going like within 300 feet of the school as well.
Of the building itself, wow.
Of the school property. It's
Right.
within 400 feet
Okay.
of the building
Gotcha.
itself.
400
But,
feet.
Yeah, 400 feet of the building, 300 feet on
gosh.
the property, I think.
Oh, my
But
God.
the kiddies are in the incineration zone should you have
It's
an explosion.
751
Right.
feet
Right.
Yeah.
for this size pipe.
Well, Jenny was saying in California, we don't have regulations like this, and not all states do, but in California, they aren't allowed to build public schools on land that has existing pipeline infrastructure on it because of that. It has to be a 1,500 foot buffer zone between
Right.
like pipeline infrastructure and any schools that they build
For just
for that
basic
reason.
safety.
Yeah, and it's like not to say that like explosions are imminent, but it's just another piece of why this pipeline doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially if we're hearing from the governor and from the state's like comprehensive energy plan that we want to be shifting to renewables, or like we only want like, I don't know, what is it? We only want this pipeline to exist for the next 50 years. It's just like, that doesn't make any sense. If we're building out this infrastructure, it's like a multi-million-dollar project.
Very expensive.
We're putting a ton of resources into it, and we're not building long-term sustainable jobs that will stay in our communities at all, because we're going to bring in labor to work on the pipeline, and then the cost of the fuel is going to go up, and we're going to be basically isolating ourselves and limiting our choices moving towards the future on like what we're going to be able to use to power our communities and heat our homes, basically. And it's just like, it's asinine.
And
It's
they're,
crazy.
and they're selling it as choice.
Right, they're selling it as choice. It's also interesting to me because going out on doors and talking to people, it's not only folks in Monkton who are opposed to it, it's like everyone that I talk to, most of the people are like, you know, if I had a choice in this issue, I wouldn't want the pipeline to go through, but it doesn't feel like I have any power or have any say in the decision that's being made, which is just kind of like,
Not
That's a-
accidental, that's how the political
Right.
system works. None of us have
Totally.
any
Right.
representation.
Well,
Yeah.
look at every one of the meetings that have, public meetings, most of the majority, every time, has been against the pipeline. Yet they're saying, from the Vermont Gas's point of view, that most people want this gas.
Right. It's just
Well,
a
try to
small
find enough proponents for this pipeline to build this pipeline. You know, that's why they're having trouble. Nobody wants this thing. You know, if there were enough people between here and Middlebury that really felt this was a good thing, they should be able to wind that through all those people that are for this pipeline. But those people aren't there. You know, it's like the people that are saying, yeah, I want cheap gas. They want it at no cost to themselves.
Right.
You know? It's like, well, if it's coming along, I'll take it. But they
Right.
don't want to put anything on the table and say, hey, yeah, I'll ante up my property for this pipeline. You know, that's not happening out there.
Right, and of course, that corporate sector always has, and they plan on always having a lot more power than the average citizen or groups of citizens. You know, I'm not just kidding when I say we live in a state of absolute corporate domination. I mean, if you're honest with yourself, that's what this is, posing as a
Yeah.
democracy. Like the famous line from George Orwell's Animal Farm, when the pigs are talking or whatever, and he says, you know, basically we're all created equal, that some of us are more equal than others,
Yeah.
which they, you know, people at a high level truly believe that. You
Yeah.
know, it's a joke, but they truly believe it. So I was, you know, another just rhetorical question. Do you think the Public Service Board has the courage to deny a certificate of public good when Governor Shumlin is openly in favor of this project? I mean, we're just speculating, but watching them the other night, I mean,
I don't think they can, maybe they will, but it just seems outrageous if they pass phase two, because, or give that one a certificate of
There's
public
absolutely-
good. Because it's not in the public good. And there's been a lot more outcry against phase two than phase one.
and towns actually, you know, passing referendum at the town meeting this March, you know, basically disallowing the pipeline to pass through their town limits. I mean, that is a big deal.
Yeah, and then at the same time, you got the select board of Shoreham, you know, who's the citizens have said no, and the select board is saying, well, you give us $100,000, we can probably get this through.
But select boards will kiss ass. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah,
political
some of
body.
them will.
Individually, maybe they wouldn't as individuals, but once you get in power and you start getting pressured by big, powerful corporations and politicians, they will kiss ass.
Right.
Well, they're a real nice town down there in Shoreham. I mean, the select board chairman is even willing to step up and buy your property from you if you don't want a pipeline to go across it.
Right, wasn't that what he said?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if that would really happen.
I think it is happening.
Yeah.
I think he's buying up land that's going to have
well,
a
as a
pipeline.
land speculator.
He
Yeah.
thinks he's going to make money on this.
No, really? Seriously.
Some of the fallout
That's
from this.
amazing.
So they're
He'll build housing developments
yeah,
on it.
right.
Oh, Jesus.
We can put a Walmart right there on the pipeline.
Right.
The
Call it
select
like
board
Fox Glen or something.
in Shoreham is working on an MOU with Vermont Gas. In spite of the fact that more than half the town said that they don't want it, but they agreed to giving Shoreham $100,000 for a community fund.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ironic because they would not give Monkton. Monkton asked for $2,000 per landowner for legal fees, to cover legal fees, to cover
Your closing
cover your
costs.
closing costs. They refused. They gave them $2,000 for the entire town to have a workshop, a legal workshop, which is kind of ridiculous. Any lawyer will tell you they can't give you legal advice unless they're your attorney. So now there's some people in Monkton that are saying, no, wait a minute, we want $100,000. If Shoreham's going to get $100,000, we should get $100,000.
Damn straight.
And this is the way it goes. I mean, they're driving a hard bargain. They are, I think Vermont Gas is on the ropes. They really need to get Shoreham on board for this, or at least Shoreham. They're never going to get Cornwall.
Right. Evidence of that is Monkton getting a PowerPoint presentation for whatever, and then $100,000 is quite a large leap above that.
Yeah.
Well, and it kind of is like, there's like a lot more opposition around phase 2. I think that's like a reflection of the work that's being put in, though,
Yeah.
to
I
like
do
the
too.
opposition to phase 1, because
Definitely.
we've been organizing around this pipeline since, like 2 Novembers ago,
Yeah.
basically. Like, it's been a while,
Going
on.
And it's like getting the ball rolling as much, and like really building people's vision for how we can like actually claim our power and be, like,
educating them.
yeah, totally. Around like why this pipeline's a bad idea and what we can do to stop it is like a lot of people already know why the pipeline's a bad idea, but it's like getting them to like the what we can do to stop the pipeline place. And so since that place, we've been doing that with folks like in our communities all over the state, like we've gotten enough people to be on board with like the, oh yeah, we could stop it maybe, that I feel like that ball is now gathering momentum toward rolling into phase 2. And I think it's a reflection, like the money that Shoreham is getting is a reflection of like the fight that Monkton has put up too, it's like all connected. They are aware of, like, have the experience of Monkton fighting like hell to stop this pipeline and are like, oh shit, we need to up our game a little bit in these other towns or they're gonna be giving us the same ball
I
game,
shudder to
basically.
think of what would happen in Monkton if they'd had put $100,000 on the table
Yeah.
to begin with.
Right.
Because, that money
Well,
talks.
it's out and out bribery, sure.
Yeah.
And always, there's a famous, and we've mentioned it on the show a bunch of times about the report from the Trilateral Commission in the 1970s called, it's an infamous work, and it's called The Crisis of Democracy. And to boil down the entire long, drawn-out work, the crisis of democracy is people, regular people, participating in it. So anytime that people organize and get together, I mean, that is the only way you can balance any kind of corporate power or the power over your politicians.
Right.
When people get together and organize independently, you can make things
And
happen.
motivate people to get
And
off their
motivate people.
butts and do something, because that's the thing. We are the many, and they are a few.
Right.
So unless we get everybody mobilized, not just the people sitting on the couch going, yeah, you're right, but they have to do something. They have to get out and protest or
Right.
write letters or call their representatives. That's the other thing that's been pretty discouraging for us is that, when we first started out, we called our select board. They were like, what you said, it's inevitable. And then we called our representatives. They said, well, it's really not our department. So then we called, I don't know, we wrote to the governor, and he's like, no, this is a great thing. All of our elected officials have been absolutely worthless as far as
Because it was
representing
a
what we-
foregone conclusion.
Yeah.
They had already decided based
they
on.
did, and they weren't interested in hearing
Right.
what the problems were that we had with it.
Well, they were interested in hearing that the gas was coming. Wow, maybe I can get it to Bristol and help out my local people.
And there's still, like, no matter what I've read, no matter where I've looked, there is very little, even though, like Don Gilbert in his wonderful letter to the editor here in the Burlington Free Press, they talk about hooking up Vermonters and all this incredible benefit to just regular Vermonters that we're going to, but the number of residential homes and small businesses getting hooked up is very, very little. Just very small in number.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that's all just smokescreen anyway, because they don't want you to see what the real prize is, and a lot of people don't even know what they're really going after. It's like,
right.
Is it Cabot? No, it's International Paper. No, it's Rutland. It's actually phase 4 where they hook to the federal pipeline system. That's what they
Right.
want 1,400 pounds of pressure
sure.
for, so that they can mainline gas through this state. 'Cause what they mainline through
Start
here will
feeding
be
New York State.
It'll be 15, 20 times more than we will ever use within the state. I mean,
Right.
it's a huge amount of gas that you can push through that pipeline with
to
that
big
kind of pressure.
customers and to industry in New York
And
State.
exports too, just because right now gas prices are so low, and because Vermont Gas is a subsidiary of Gas Metro and like these bigger corporations, like Vermont Gas makes money on building pipelines, but their parent corporations make money on selling gas, and it's not in their interest to have gas prices be so low. They're not making a huge profit off of that. And so like when we build out the United States, I guess is the we right now, but like we don't have a ton of gas infrastructure right now. We're not exporting gas right now. So there's this like kind of supply glut of gas, and the prices are driven down by that. And then when they build out this infrastructure connected to the US main line, like the grid there, and we're able to export it, those prices are gonna skyrocket and rise again. It's gonna be like propane was and like oil is, like it's gonna be like any of those other fossil fuels. It's limited. And they're aiming for bigger markets too.
And our choices will be gone.
Right.
And the
And our
pipeline.
planet will be a crisp,
Yeah.
Right.
total burnt piece
Right.
of
All our water
dirt.
will be tainted.
And
Yeah.
the pipeline system is so leaky that they can't just cap it and hang on to it because it's just oozing off into the atmosphere every day. There's huge amounts of it just going away.
Some of they're very really ominous, and some of the most recent research. Did you hear about the two different NASA studies, basically about the West Antarctic ice shelf, where it's literally and now demonstrably and provable that it's basically toast, and it is going to melt, and it's melting much sooner than people had anticipated, which is, it guarantees not a 1 foot or 2 foot, a 10-foot rise in ocean levels, and that is public knowledge. That's NASA, and it's accepted, it's peer reviewed, and it's coming. And it may be, they're also saying it may be much quicker than people realize. 10-foot rise in ocean levels, even 4 or 5 feet, devastates every coastal city and civilization in the world.
Which
Our
is where
fragile
most
little
of the
systems can't
population
take
is.
that. I mean, I don't even know what that looks like.
And it's going to disproportionately impact the people who are poorest and have been
Exactly.
like the most systemically like exploited in these systems that we have now, because like rich people can build gated communities, they can escape, they can relocate themselves. The people that are going to be like the most disproportionately impacted by any of the like who are being the most impacted now, is like the like countries who have the fewest number of resources because of historic exploitation
Right.
and colonialization and like the way that resources flow to the richest countries now, and so like right now we're experiencing climate crisis. There are droughts, there are floods, and like I don't know, it's just a way of exacerbating all of the like economic and like the crises of governments, and we see like world conflict like escalating also because resources are getting to be less and
Right.
less, so like we're going to be fighting over fewer and fewer crumbs as like this crisis goes on, and I don't know, it's just like compounding itself over and over and over again. And then for us in like New England, in like one of the richest countries of the world, to be like, we're just gonna go for it. We're gonna build out our fossil fuel infrastructure is a huge fuck you to like
You're
all
right.
of the other like people in the world who are struggling with already climate chaos.
If you
And
listen
the
to the
next
like,
generation.
especially
Yeah.
like the national like Tea Party-ish or conservative candidates, they're actually trying to out-asshole and out-stupid each other with ridiculous statements in climate denial that's I like to call it hallucinogenically out of touch, like tripping on dumb acid, I call it. I mean, it's the craziest shit I've ever heard. And it's arguments at like a second or third grade level.
Yeah.
And what does the corporate media do? Just either suck it up and toe the line, or not. There's just is no counterbalance to that kind of
I
insanity.
know. I
And
keep waiting
unfortunately-
for them to for people to just say, "Holy cow! I don't want to be like these people." But
Right,
don't
I know.
listen.
It takes people to get solid, demonstrably true information consistently and reliably, which the corporate media is never going to do, never will do, never has done.
boy, that's been a wake-up call in this pipeline thing. Seeing the way the media, even in Vermont. I mean, I'm not a TV watcher, but
Good for you.
I've
one.
seen the coverage. People say, "Oh yeah, I saw you on TV," and I will have done a 20-minute interview, and the interviewer will just like say, "Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that," and then they show this little clip that totally loses,
Right,
takes
no
it out of
context.
context, and just totally loses it. And in fact, the whole thing about the last public hearing, where 94% of the people spoke out against the pipeline again. This is the fourth time. And what did they talk about? That Will Bennington was arrested when I think he was just given a citation.
Right.
And that was the news, and they didn't not even mention the fact that this public
Sure, you
hearing.
avoid all the substantive issues and
Right.
then go for the shock and titillation. Some little
Yeah,
student
under arrest,
can't-
oh boy.
And let's don't even get into the whole trespassing thing. It's like Vermont Gas has a problem with people going into their office during business hours.
Yeah.
Oh, you want it open to
These
the
people
public?
send land agents out to trespass on landowners. I mean, landowners collectively have passed out, 75 no trespassing orders against
Right.
them, and they go, wow, this is just the way we do business. But you go into their office and they have a shit fit about it. It's
Or a
like,
couple
come
guys
on.
want to unfurl a banner that
Oh my
shows
goodness, it
how
was a nice
ridiculous they are.
banner,
It was a
too.
beautiful
It was
banner.
beautiful. It took a lot of work.
Right, and it made sense, and it was probably the only true thing that was around there the whole
Right,
damn day.
right.
And what's the
Yeah.
scariest is that they can walk in here and throw that banner on, and this is what the control room for the whole gas company is like. What if they actually were bad people?
Yeah.
They could have taken out the whole gas system right there.
Right, well, remember the PR guy is ex-assistant police chief of Burlington, Vermont.
That
And can
had
you
to be.
imagine how foolish you would feel when a bunch of basically activists sort of got through your monitoring and made
Yeah.
I guarantee you
You're
they
bothering, walk through your door like
right, walk
anybody
through your
would.
door. But I tell you, in that kind of security mentality and that kind of apparatus, that would shame the hell out of a dude like that.
Well, maybe
So-
that's what he was trying to do, is shame the South Burlington police to have let this assault go down right when there were 6 police cars there.
Right.
And they're saying on
Assault.
camera, we're just going to monitor the situation and make sure nothing gets violent,
Right.
when there supposedly was already an assault.
Right.
It's just the whole thing just unfolded in such a weird way. That just gave me a real clear picture of how the media really manipulates
The corporate
things.
media is
And how-
basically selling advertising space to other
To Vermont
corporations.
Gas.
Information
Yeah.
is not their product, and
No.
people really, really have to get that in their heads. You cannot trust corporate media
No.
to be honest and true with subject. They're there to serve power.
And how desperate Vermont Gas must be. I mean, God, you go out and give Sarah some water. Eventually she'll want to unchain herself from the wall. Just leave her there for a day or two.
Yeah. So
we're talking
Don't
about
let
the-
it bother you so
Yeah.
much. I mean, they obviously are pretty jittery about where their position is for them to freak out that much about such a little deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's another thing that just it's out of their comfort zone. They don't know how to deal with it. So we're referring to the demonstration that was at Vermont Gas headquarters. What was it, about a month ago now?
March 27th.
March 27th.
May.
May, yeah.
Yeah.
May.
And so that was what we were just referring to. So we were also all at the Climate Justice Action Camp that Rising Tide brought to us in Charlotte a couple weeks ago, which I thought was really an amazing event. I was just really, really impressed by the just the organization, and I hate to say professionalism, but I'm going to throw that in there. But it was just really well organized, really well run. Just the people and the conferences and the panel discussions. I really thought that was great. We also did a couple of short interviews while we were there. The question I asked attendees, was, why do you think climate justice is important? So I think Jim is going to roll some of those interviews that we did, and we will be back after that short break.
I live in East Montpelier, and I'm a lecturer in environmental studies at UVM. And I've been following the evolution of climate justice for quite a long time, and I think it's important for two main reasons. One is the climate crisis is not just another environmental issue. It's one that has affected people's lives, people's basic survival all around the world for a very long time. When we first started talking about climate justice in this country in the lead up to the UN meeting in Copenhagen, people still were talking about climate change as something in the future, as something for scientists to worry about. But it's not that. It's something that's already making it very difficult for a lot of people to live their lives. And then the second piece, which really reinforces the urgency of it, is that the people around the world who are most affected by disruptions to the climate are mostly indigenous and other land-based people in the global south, the people who have contributed overwhelmingly the least to the problem of excess emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, but have for a very long time now, for decades, been experiencing the disproportionate consequences of droughts and floods and exceptionally heavy storms and all of the ways in which changes in the climate have made it more difficult and are making it more difficult for people to live their lives.
Well, I think people have been fighting a way of organizing social life based on empire and hierarchy for hundreds of years. And now we're getting to a point where that way of organizing society based on ever-expanding empire and extraction and burning and then polluting and exploiting people as well, we're getting to the point where the very sky and the atmosphere is at risk. And so the climate justice movement is not just about carbon dioxide, it's about challenging this whole system and all of these systems that interlock to oppress people and to really destroy the ecosystems that we're a part of. And so I think that the climate justice movement has really transformative potential to begin to challenge that entire system and move towards ways of living with each other and with the land that are entirely different.
Right.
I'm Daria. I live in Burlington. And climate justice, to me, that means that we're responsible to each other, responsible to our natural environment, to future generations, to our ancestors. It's about responsibility to the larger systems that we live in, and when there are certain people and institutions that step out of line and they violate those responsibilities, it comes to us as communities to hold them accountable, and that's what justice is about. So that's why we're here. That's my perspective of why we're here. So what they're trying to do here in Vermont is connected to what they're trying to do in Canada, all across this continent, all across the world. And so I think every time they try to do a project like this, they're testing us to see how far they can push us, and that's why we have to push back at every turn.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I work with an organization called Earth First, and climate justice, I think, is just the latest trend on people fighting for a planet that is based on biocentrism and living one with the planet instead of just trying to extract its resources and use it instead of using it, living with it. And I think the climate justice movement is just the newest form in which that is taking.
Okay, so I'm talking about the fracked gas pipeline that's coming down in Addison County. Vermont Gas is the corporation that is underfunding it. And honestly, there's a whole bunch of reasons that I've gotten excited about. Like, I'm really concerned about the absolute injustice that has happened in the process to most people who've tried to intervene. I'm worried about climate change. But at the end of the day, I chose this pipeline fight because I'm an anti-capitalist. And there's And I really believe that we need profound changes to our economic and political systems, because I think it is insane that 1% of the population controls 40% of the wealth, and the bottom 80% control about 5 to 10%. That is an injustice on a systemic level. And so I think what needs to happen is we need to build a revolutionary movement to redistribute that wealth and to really build a society where everybody has access to all of the goods of society, because we all participate in the economy. Nobody as an individual can say that they made all of the healthcare system or all of the food. Like, we are all connected to each other and we're all working together. And the ruling class has exploited that and taken all of that profit away from the workers and used it to enrich themselves and gain political control. So the reason I got into this pipeline fight is that there is $21 trillion in the ground still of oil, gas, and coal. And at the end of the day, I don't want the ruling class to have a single cent of that money, because they're only going to use it to continue to bust our unions, to make sure that we never get a single payer system, to make sure that people are too hungry and too tired to rise up.
So you tell them, Emily.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Now, you know, that those interviews are just an excellent example of why people in power really don't want average citizens to participate in some of these, like, greed cult, I call it, kind of decision-making processes that they have, where everything is based on enriching the, you know, ruling class elites. As far as even one fact about International Paper that I really never hear anybody bring up, it is clearly International Paper, of course, is a large multinational. I think it's, I believe it's about a $50 billion corporation, and they're in 26 countries worldwide. They're also our region's largest polluter, and they emit 5 times the emissions of the entire state of Vermont annually. So 5 times what the entire state of Vermont, all of us, emit. And they're making pulp with pine trees, which is basically a dying industry in and of itself. And not only that, industrial hemp paper would certainly do, and doesn't have to have all those nasty chemical processes. And so, do we really want to, even if IP is, you know, one of the intended target of phase 2, do we really want to enable them even further?
Not really.
Increase their profits and help.
But we're talking about 16 jobs.
I know.
We can't lose those 16 jobs.
There's
Oh my
over
goodness.
8,000 New Yorkers that work in Vermont, but let's
Yeah.
protect the 16 jobs from Vermont.
Yeah,
that live in New York.
and the pulpwood that they are buying, and people, that's one of the reasons a lot of people say they support this pipeline, because they want to see IP survive because of the loggers. Well, there is an up-and-coming market for pulpwood, and that's pellets, wood pellets. And recently at the Working Landscape Conference in Randolph, one of the loggers that did a conference said that IP used to be the only girl on the dance floor, and now they have all these other markets, and they're actually paying better. So that's not a big loss, you know, if those markets for pulpwood went away.
So if we developed a sustainable, well-managed pellet manufacturing base in Vermont, it would probably provide hundreds, if not 1,000 jobs.
Right.
And the loggers and landowners, you know, doing their sustainable harvesting would actually stand to benefit more than shipping it over to New York State. And it would, as was well pointed out at the Public Service Board hearing, by the nonprofit based in Bristol, which I can't remember their name, and I'm so sorry, but that even at the state of today's market, even though natural gas is relatively inexpensive right now, chips are, I mean, wood pellets are actually cheaper.
Right.
With doing honest math. So that even that argument goes out the window.
Right.
So we were talking about the corporate media, and I just wanted to, I'm going to hold this up. This is Don Gilbert, who is of Heinsberg, president and CEO of Vermont Gas. This is when he decides to have a letter to the editor in the Burlington Free Press let's see if we can hold this up here a little bit. This is what he gets. So it's a half a page with all kinds of subtitling and editorial work, obviously. This probably is the PR department, and he just signed it. I seriously doubt he took the time to write this. But we're talking, so this is it says, no doubt about it, Vermonters are passionate about the Green Mountain State. That's a healthy sign of an engaged citizenry. So that's a little
Patronizing.
Dig, patronizing
That's
about
super
activists,
patronizing.
right? One project, the Addison Rutland Natural Gas Project, has been vigorously debated. Unfortunately, sometimes the facts can get lost.
I wish we could have a debate.
I know, that would be nice.
would be
to actually
awesome.
have an honest debate would be cool.
No, I just want them to stop the pipeline.
Yeah.
I don't really care about the debate.
The fucking pipeline.
Yeah, the
All right.
fucking pipeline.
In Vermont, there is no project proposed or underway with the combined economic and environmental benefits of the Addison Rutland Natural Gas Project. You like my soothing?
It's doing good.
Okay.
You and
The
Adam
first
Ruby.
of 3 phases has earned a certificate of public good from state regulators. Regulators are reviewing the second, and the third is in the planning stages to expand services to Rut Vegas. With this progress, now is the perfect time to review the facts, showing how customers, communities, and our state will benefit from the long-term savings and other advantages of the Addison Rutland Natural Gas Project. And that's, again, hallucinogenically out of touch would really fit this. So it goes over affordability, jobs, community funding, which I'm not sure what the hell that is all about, cleaner air, energy efficiency, safe operations, regional cooperation and benefits, national and local support, and then a learn more section. So you can go to their website.
What the community funding is the community is funding this project. This is a 680-acre land grab. You
Right.
know, if you bought the land, it would cost them about $70 million to buy all the property that this goes across. So that's how the community supports it. You know, they take our property and use it. They make the money, we pay the taxes and the mortgage on it.
Which would be more of a true reflection. What he says is providing natural gas service to Cornwall and Shoreham. Aren't those the 2 towns that
Don't
want
want
it.
They don't want it. Will save residents in those communities alone about $2 million over 20 years while meaningfully reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. And I guess he's talking about how it shrinks municipal heating budgets, and so that's the community funding that
Yeah,
he's
after you
referring to.
buy a new $50,000 boiler for your school to accept their
Yes.
natural gas.
Right, until the bubble of what, as soon as the easy to frack out, natural gas is depleted. I mean, what's going to happen to prices once demand is way up?
Well, that's even an
Supply goes
oxymoron,
down.
right? Like, easier to frack out is like fracking is a response to like gas becoming less and less available,
Right,
yeah.
You know, so it's like
Exactly,
they're clearly this like supply of gas is depleted enough that we now have to use like, what is it, like
Extreme.
70 million gallons of water or something for one frack well,
Yeah.
right? So we're just like
With
in the
countless
face.
thousands of gallons of toxic
Right.
chemicals in there
Totally.
somehow.
Totally,
Yeah.
and like causing cancer in communities in Alberta, depleting the water supply, primarily impacting native land and like native communities, and also creating and exacerbating, I would say, like they create these boom towns around this. It's like the gold rush, you know,
Like North
and
Dakota right now.
yeah, and it's like instead of creating like land sustaining, community sustaining jobs, we're creating jobs that kill our community and land base and also perpetuate like different forms of oppression within those like boom towns that are happening. There's just like so many things I think you can look at as examples of like economic exploitation, sort of what Emily was saying in her thing. There's just like, it just gets to this fever pitch, right, of
You're
people
looking
being
at it
so
wrong. This
exploited.
is opportunity for drug addicts and prostitutes to go out and make a living in a new area where they're not known.
Which is-
services.
I mean, but it also reflects like like those things are criminalized, right? But like the systems that exist now impose those like economic like that's how people get by, you know, like doing those things because we are left with shit. Because the rich people get richer and we're completely like stomped on over and over again, and it gets harder and harder to make a living. And then certain like folks will turn to different ways of making a living in like criminalized ways, right? And then they're put in jail. And then it's just like this like perpetual cycle just happens where we like oppress people to the point where they have to turn to like extra legal things to get by, and then we put them in prison, and that's a huge industry in and of itself. So it's like all of these interlocking things, right, that are like centered, and this is why I guess climate justice is so important, is like centered around like the very basic thing of like what's fueling our economy right now is oil, fossil fuels, gas, coal, right? And like so all of those things, right, like the oppression of working people, the like interlocking interests of like the prison industrial complex, the government, the corporations, all of that comes to a head in these projects. You know, the media representing the interests of only the powerful people, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, we do, like Andrew pointed out in his answer to my question, if we do not get to a world where we are doing things based on human needs, and we continue to do things based on the needs of our ruling elites and corporate profits only, which is, again, being honest, those are the only decisions that get made. It is how much can we enrich the already rich in a wealth enhancement system, and nobody uses sustainability or what, you know, the philosophy of what do people really need to last. Do we want to last another 1,000 years or so? I mean, it would be cool. We could really learn some stuff and have fun. Or do we want to plunge off of a climate cliff and narrow short-term gains so, you know, a bunch of yahoos can blast to the country club in their Lamborghinis, you know, after climbing off of the yacht. You know, at a certain point, some of that stuff has to end.
Right.
And yeah, I'm hopeful that we will get there based on people like you guys, and all around the world. There is resistance to corporate domination right now. I mean, almost in unprecedented levels. Now, those sectors are also cranking up to resist, you know, militarily and with all these anti-terrorism laws. Actually, by definition, all four of us could be considered under the modified U.S. codes and stuff as eco-domestic terrorists. Only because they put language in. If you resist fossil fuel infrastructure, you are now technically a terrorist.
Yeah, and try to resist it. And you mean they try to tell you that, you know, like Don Gilbert, you know, that was one of his statements. If a community doesn't want us, we won't go. We're not going to force ourselves on anybody.
Right.
Yet 3 towns say, we don't want gas. And it's like, well, that was another situation where we're talking about.
Yeah.
And here's $100,000. Maybe you'll reconsider.
Yeah, when the bullshit stops, you know.
Now, really, that shouldn't even be on the editorial page. That should be on the cartoon page, you know.
Or you should have to pay.
Right.
A cartoon. That's much better.
I mean, he definitely seemed like a cartoon character. I mean, this looks like something Walt Disney would have designed.
It does. Yeah. No, that's too flattering. It definitely should be an advertisement, though, and this should not be. I mean, this is not objective.
No, as if they haven't been
Unbiased
advertising. They've been doing,
viewpoint.
I think as of September of last year, they had done over $500,000 in advertising for a project that's supposedly such a great deal. Why wouldn't it just sell itself?
Right.
You know,
Well,
it doesn't need to be advertised.
Sorry to interrupt you. Me and Will, and I can't remember if anyone else was there, but we went to this open house. Vermont Gas was in the beginning part of phase 1, doing these open houses in communities like along the route, and they would just like go to different communities and represent different pieces of the truth. They would just like lie, basically, but probably what they thought they were doing is representing different pieces of the truth to different communities. It was very clear to many of the people who were going to those open houses that they were being, like the wool was being pulled over their eyes. But we saw Eileen Similarnes at one of those, and we were like, how are things going? Like, and it came up, and I guess Will had asked her a question, and he was like, so how are things going? Like, it seems like you all like are doing a lot of public relations stuff. And she was like, yeah, we had to hire a new PR firm to like deal with people being opposed to this, and we were just like, oh, good.
Well, that's an admission
Yeah.
of having some problems. I mean,
Right.
nobody spends, in the corporate sector, you don't spend a nickel on advertising or any PR unless you have to.
You have to.
Yeah.
And
Or-
what was our budget? I mean, the people that have been fighting this thing, we've been doing it on a shoestring.
$1.298,
Yeah.
I like to say.
It's
Which-
all volunteer.
It's volunteer.
Yeah.
That's like, if people are doing this because it's in their heart. It's not something that they're going to get money for, you know, and that's a difference.
And I think that speaks to like the profundity of like what power we do have when we work together and organize together. Because like we are up against a lot. We're up against corporate moguls. We're up against a ton of money. We're up against lobbyists. We're up against like, you know, the main resource that they have is money,
Yeah.
right? And we have people, and we have hearts, and we have minds, and we have a lot of like strong, courageous, really critically thinking people who are on
Awesome
our
people.
side. Yeah, it's
We're gonna do
amazing.
that critical mass.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's been, if the one positive thing I can say that's come from this is the amount of people that I have met that are just awesome.
I know, isn't that incredible?
They are, and you know, when they really get cranking, it's like you just have to like step back and watch, because there are some people that just.
When you have the moral high ground in your argument,
Yeah.
and the people that you meet in those debates are just really incredible. And it takes a lot of integrity to stick your head out, you know, stick your neck out, because the system and just peer pressure and all that is really against you. You stand the chance of being ostracized in your
Oh
community.
yeah, we lost a lot of friends.
Yeah,
And we've
You
made
know,
a lot of
people-
friends.
But you
Yeah,
make a
we
lot
made
of friends, and
yeah.
at a certain point, you know, do you want to remain hallucinogenically out of touch, or do you really want to work for some positive change? It's very liberating to be, and it's been that way for me for a long time.
Right.
It's like, that's one of the satisfying things about going to and talking to people that are for the gas, is to explain to them what your situation is, you know, because most people, when they realize what they're doing to the landowners, they go, well, that's not right. You know,
Right.
you don't want gas, but that's not right.
And at least it gets them thinking about it. Because
Exactly.
if you listen just to the one side, the corporate side, you know, people can be easily hoodwinked.
Oh yeah.
And it
Well, they
happens every
speak
day.
to human nature, which is like inertia and
And
laziness. You know, people just want to be able to turn the thermostat up,
Yeah.
not think about what's happening, and just keep doing what they're doing.
They're
And
just
the
all
whole-
education issues. You know, if you don't know what you've never heard, and a lot of people do not realize the dire consequences of doing this. They
Right.
don't realize really who's pulling the strings, and people have a tendency to suck up to power.
yeah.
When you're when you're not really versed in
Well,
the
it's
issues
fear,
and stuff, you
yeah.
tend to gravitate towards the bully because you feel somehow in that envelope you feel a little bit more secure.
Yeah.
Well, I would also just say that like I feel like we have an enormous capacity to not just be like lazy and inertia, but like to love each other and work together and cooperate and do the thing that's like
so.
right for our communities. And I think that we live in these systems that so exploit us that it erodes our humanity and like erodes our ability to connect with each other in these real ways. And so
Right.
then based on that, like, and we're schooled from like birth, you know, to like compete with each other. We're rewarded for competing with each other. We're told like that everything is scarce and you have to fight for your piece of the pie.
Right.
And then we're all struggling to get by, you know, paying the rent, paying the bills, going to work every day, maybe for a boss that's like mostly sucks or something, you know, like it's different for everyone. But
Yeah,
like
I just meant inside the system, the way we're indoctrinated, not not human nature. I am much more proud of us than that, and I actually have tremendous, respect and admiration for people's initiative and people's basic sense of morality. We would not be here if we weren't good to each other, because we have sort of organized ourselves around the ugliest possible things we could organize around, which is narrow, self-serving greed. And look at how beautiful we still really are. I mean, as a group of people. So that we've survived in spite of corporate domination, not because of it. You know, and I will always believe that. So I guess as we have about a minute or so left. Thank you guys for showing up.
No problem.
We're going to continue this as long as this pipeline
we're gonna stop
is
it.
not in the ground, right?
We're gonna
We're
stop
going
the
to
pipeline.
continue. We're going to continue covering the issue. We're going to continue keeping the pressure on them. And again, thank goodness for VCAM, because like I said in the beginning, it does allow us to speak truth to power. Try try to get on Channel 3 and see how long they'll let you talk like this. Hopefully it seems amazing to people.
Yeah.
Hopefully we have some viewers.
Yeah.
And thanks again.
All right.
It's been really good.
Anytime.